Hello everyone, learn English through the story and improve your fluency. Vanished without a trace. The last call. The clock on Ethan Roy's bedside table glowed 2:13 a.m. His phone buzzed for the fifth time in 2 minutes, each vibration more urgent than the last. He reached for it with groggy fingers, rubbing his eyes as the screen lit up. Sophie Daniels, missed call. He blinked. Sophie? That was strange. They hadn't spoken in weeks, not since she'd moved to the outskirts of Asheville to take up a quiet artist's retreat. They were once inseparable, college roommates, coffee shop philosophers, and road trip buddies, but life had drifted them apart, like leaves on separate streams. Now, 5 missed calls at 2 in the morning? He swiped to call her back, but it went straight to voicemail. Again. And again. Worried, Ethan got up, heart now racing faster than his thoughts. He checked her Instagram. The last post was 3 days ago, a picture of her standing by the lakeside near her cottage, wearing that familiar smile but with eyes that somehow looked distant. The caption read, "Peace, finally," or maybe just silence. Something felt off. He called her one last time. No answer. He debated. It was absurd to drive across the state at this hour. But he couldn't shake the feeling, something was wrong. By 3 a.m., he was on the road. The road to Asheville was nearly empty, save for a few trucks and the occasional deer darting across the dark highway. Ethan tried Sophie's number every 15 minutes. Still nothing. By sunrise, the narrow trail leading to her cabin was barely visible through the early morning mist. Trees loomed on either side like quiet sentinels. Her cottage, a single-story wooden structure with peeling paint and a wraparound porch, sat at the edge of a still lake. It looked exactly like the pictures she'd shared. But something was off. He knocked. No answer. He called out. Sophie? It's Ethan. Silence. The front door wasn't locked. His hand hesitated on the knob. Then he pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and something else, like forgotten coffee and damp paper. Her easel stood near the window, a half-finished painting of the lake still on it. A kettle sat cold on the stove. Her phone was on the kitchen counter, the screen cracked. Ethan's stomach dropped. He checked the bathroom. Empty. Bedroom. Empty. No signs of struggle, no broken furniture, just absence. He found her journal on the table, flipped to the last entry. He watches me from the lake now. I thought I imagined it. But yesterday, he waved. Whispers in the water. Asheville's local police station was small, barely 2 rooms and a front desk. The kind of place where filing parking violations was the most exciting part of the week. A sleepy officer in his 50s named Sergeant Reed sat behind the desk, sipping lukewarm coffee as Ethan explained everything he saw at Sophie's cabin. She's missing, Ethan insisted. She called me 5 times around 2 a.m. When I got to her place, the door was unlocked. Her phone was left behind, and her journal. Journal? Reed raised a brow. People write all kinds of things when they're stressed, artists especially. She wrote someone was watching her from the lake. Reed leaned back in his chair, sighing as if Ethan had interrupted his weekend nap. Son, how long you said she's been gone? I don't know. But it's been at least 6 hours since that call. She wouldn't leave her phone behind. And she didn't take her wallet either. People vanish all the time. Breakups, meltdowns, cabin fever, give it 48 hours. Then maybe we'll file a report. You don't understand, this isn't like Sophie. Reed gave him a tired smile. Everyone says that. I'll send a deputy to look in on the cabin later today. You said it's out by Mistwood Lake? Ethan nodded. Well, I'll be honest. That area's always been odd. But no bodies, no evidence, nothing I can do yet. Back at the cottage, Ethan stepped outside, the wind stirring the trees around him. Mist still floated off the lake's surface like a veil. It was eerily quiet. He remembered the journal again. He watches me from the lake now. I thought I imagined it. But yesterday, he waved. Who was he? There were no other cottages on this side of Mistwood Lake, just thick forest and overgrown trails. He walked along the shoreline, scanning for footprints, anything. A few feet from the water, Ethan stopped. There were impressions in the mud. Barefoot. Human. Leading from the edge of the forest to the lake but not back. He crouched beside them. The prints were narrow, deep. Sophie's size? Possibly. The last print vanished where the water met the land. Suddenly, something rippled. He froze. The surface of the lake shifted gently, unnaturally. As if disturbed from below, not above, a bubble rose. Then another. He stood up quickly. Nothing else moved. Back inside, Ethan rummaged through Sophie's things, looking for clues. Her laptop was missing, but he found a sketch pad. The drawing started off simple trees, lakes, birds. But the last few pages grew darker. Obsessive. A pale figure near the lake. Long-limbed. No face. Sometimes drawn standing in trees, sometimes rising from water. Over and over. In one sketch, it looked like it had antlers. He flipped to the last page. It was a full drawing of the lake. And a person standing in the middle of it. The person had Sophie's clothes. But their eyes were missing. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the tree line, Ethan met the one neighbor within walking distance, Martha Keyes, an older woman in her 60s who lived about a mile through the woods. Oh, that girl? Martha nodded slowly. She used to wave when she jogged by. Sweet thing. Quiet. Did you see or hear anything the last couple days? Martha looked uneasy. Well. Night before last, I did hear something. Crying, maybe. Screaming? I wasn't sure. Thought it was a coyote or something worse. Didn't go out to check. It was late. Did she ever mention anyone watching her? At that, Martha stiffened. You don't think she went into the lake, do you? I don't know. Martha bit her lip. People talk about Mistwood Lake, you know. Locals say it's cursed. Old tales. They say it takes people. Always has. Ethan stared at her. You're saying something in the lake took her? I'm saying, she said, voice hushed, you should be careful looking for her. Especially after dark. That night, Ethan stayed at the cabin. He couldn't sleep. At 3:12 a.m., the floor creaked in the hallway. He sat up. Sophie, he called softly. No reply. Then he heard a tap, from the window. Then again. He crept to the window and looked out. A pale figure stood at the edge of the lake, its back turned. Long hair. Thin frame. It looked just like Sophie. But when it turned around, it had no eyes. The lake's curse. Ethan barely slept after what he saw, or thought he saw. By morning, he wasn't even sure it was real. Dreams could deceive. Fear could play tricks. Maybe it was just his mind trying to make sense of Sophie's disappearance. But deep down, he knew what he saw. The figure at the lake. It had looked like her, but it wasn't. At the local library in Asheville, a single dusty room above the general store, Ethan found a stack of old town records. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but something Martha had said stuck with him. Locals say the lake takes people. Always has. A helpful young librarian, Clara Wells, helped him dig into old files. Most of it's on microfilm, she said. Asheville never digitized anything. It took hours, but finally, he found something. A 1992 newspaper clipping, teen girl vanishes from Mistwood Retreat. 19-year-old Danielle Harrow was last seen walking along the edge of Mistwood Lake late Thursday evening. No signs of foul play were discovered, but locals say the lake has a history of strange happenings. Harrow's family insists she wouldn't have run away. Her disappearance marks the fourth in 20 years tied to the lake area. 4 in 20 years? Another article from 1976. A boy, age 12, disappeared while camping with his father. Only his shoes were found, facing the lake. In 1951, a young couple vanished during a honeymoon at the old lodge that once stood where Sophie's cottage is now. All the cases had one thing in common. No bodies. No signs. Just gone. Ethan sat back, heart pounding. He flipped to one final entry, an old folk article titled, "The Watcher Beneath Mistwood." It read like a campfire story. A spirit or creature said to live beneath the lake. People described it differently, sometimes as a man, sometimes not human at all. It only appeared when it was summoned by grief or fear. It calls to those who are broken. Whispers to the lost. And when it finds one who listens, it pulls them beneath, not to kill, but to keep. Ethan took the article and returned to the cabin. In the fading light of day, he found Sophie's sketchpad again. This time, he noticed something on the back cover. Etched in tiny pencil marks, "The lake listens. I shouldn't have talked to it." He turned suddenly. The window behind him had fogged, despite the warm air inside. Words were drawn into the condensation. "Help me." Ethan stumbled back. His breath caught. The window was closed. Locked. But the message was inside. Night fell. Ethan sat by the door with a flashlight and Sophie's journal in his lap. He began reading again from earlier entries. One stood out. "I didn't mean to talk to him. I thought it was my own reflection. But then it blinked. It visits most nights now. Just stands in the water. Sometimes it looks like people I know. Last night, it looked like my father. Tonight, it was me.
I think it wants me to come in. Just for a moment." Ethan felt his hands tremble. Suddenly, there was a sound. A soft knock, not on the door, on the window. He slowly turned the flashlight toward it. A face stared back, his own, but it didn't blink, didn't move. Then, it smiled. Ethan didn't sleep, he couldn't. Even after the face vanished from the window, the feeling remained, that something was close, pressing against the walls of the cabin, watching every move he made. The mirror in the bathroom kept fogging over despite the absence of steam. Shadows seemed to shift without reason. And every so often, the floor creaked even when he stood still. By sunrise, Ethan was back at Martha Key's house. She answered the door with tired eyes, already dressed like she'd been waiting. "I saw it," he said without any greeting. "Outside the window. It looked like me." She let him in without a word and poured hot tea into chipped cups. Her hands trembled slightly as she sat. "You're not the first," she said. He stared. "What do you mean?" She sipped her tea before answering. "Years ago, before I moved here, the woman who owned your friend's cottage lived alone. She was quiet too, liked her garden, fed the ducks at the lake. Then one morning, she disappeared. Door wide open, breakfast half eaten on the table. No signs of her? None. But a few weeks later, a local boy was camping on the other side of the lake. He said he saw her standing in the water, waving. Did anyone believe him? His parents didn't. They called it a dream. Martha leaned forward. But I did. Because a year later, my own sister vanished. Ethan felt a chill crawl down his spine. She left in the middle of the night. No note, nothing packed. Except, Martha's voice cracked. She'd been talking about the water. Said it whispered. Said it looked like her mother one night. Then me. Then herself. She slid a drawer open and pulled out an old, yellowed book. No title, but the cover was marked with strange, swirling symbols that looked like ripples. My grandmother was Lenape, Martha said softly. Her people called the lake Namachis, the silent taker. It's not water, not just water. It's something old. It feeds on grief, on loneliness. It appears to people who are lost, people who are broken. It offers comfort, but only to lure them in. Ethan gripped his tea tighter. And once they're gone? Martha's eyes darkened. They're never really gone. The lake keeps pieces, reflections, echoes. It shows them to you to pull you in too. He remembered the face at the window, his own, but not. And Sophie, was what he saw, just her echo. Back at the cabin, Ethan searched every corner, now knowing he might not be looking for Sophie herself, but a shadow of her. A trace. He opened the crawl space beneath the floorboards and found something unexpected. A box wrapped in plastic. Inside it were dozens of old Polaroids, of Sophie painting, smiling, walking by the lake, and notes. Dozens of pages of scribbled writing. He began to read. Greater than, it pretends to be the people you miss most. Greater than, I stayed out of the water. Until the night I saw Ethan. He told me he missed me. But it wasn't him. Greater than, I'm leaving this behind in case someone comes looking. If I'm not me anymore, don't trust me. Ethan dropped the page. Suddenly, the house went cold. He turned. Sophie was standing in the hallway. Wet, dripping, eyes wide. She looked terrified. Ethan, she whispered, is it really you? His voice caught. Sophie? She stepped forward. I've been trying to get out. For days. It won't let me go. It shows me things. I don't know if I'm real anymore. He stared at her. Everything in him wanted to believe it was her. But then he remembered her note. Greater than if I'm not me anymore, don't trust me. He backed away. Sophie's expression twisted, not in sadness, but in something else. A smile too wide, a shimmer too unnatural in her eyes. Then she said, in a voice that sounded like both of them, come with me, Ethan. The water's warm.
Ethan didn't remember running. Only the sound of his heartbeat thundering in his ears, the crashing of twigs underfoot, the wind against his face, and that voice behind him. Stay. It echoed unnaturally, stretched like something trying to imitate speech but missing the rhythm of a real human voice. He didn't stop until he reached the edge of town. By the time Ethan arrived back at the library, he was covered in sweat and mud. Clara Wells, the young librarian, looked up from her desk, startled. Ethan? What happened? It's not her, he gasped. I saw her. I talked to her, but it wasn't Sophie. It's something else. The lake, something's in it. Pretending. Clara motioned for him to sit, and he collapsed into the wooden chair across from her. He pulled the notebook from his bag, the one he found under the cabin, and laid it on the table. Lenape folklore, he said. Martha said her grandmother knew stories about it. Something called Namicus, the silent taker. Clara's eyes narrowed. She opened the book slowly. I've seen this symbol before, she said, pointing to a spiral carved on the inside cover. It's not just Lenape. Other tribes in the region had similar myths, about spirits or gods in water. Some benevolent. Some, she swallowed. Not. Ethan told her everything, the echoes, the voice, the journal entries, the faces. When he finished, she stood abruptly and disappeared into the back of the library. She returned minutes later with a worn, thick book titled, Whispers of the Wood and Water, Eastern Native Spirits and Curses. She flipped through it quickly until she landed on an illustration, a pale figure with empty eyes rising from water. The heading read, The Reflection Spirit, Keeper of the Drowned. When grief calls out to the water, it answers. It returns what was lost, but never as it was. Those who follow their reflections are taken. But there is one way to break the hold. A summoning must be reversed. A calling undone. Fire must be brought to the still water. The original caller must speak the name, while the echo is present. If the echo flees, it is not yet bound. If it stays, burn it. Light and voice together. Only then can the soul be freed. But Sophie's the one who summoned it, Ethan said. She's gone. I'm not the caller. Clara stared at the page, brow furrowed. Maybe you weren't the first one. Ethan blinked. What? Clara closed the book. You said Sophie moved here recently, right? Took over the old artist's cottage? Yeah. Clara stood. Then maybe she didn't start this. Maybe she just continued it. They drove back to the cottage before sunset, firewood and lanterns packed in the trunk. Clara also brought a vial of something her grandmother once gave her, a mix of sage oil, pine ash, and salt. A folk deterrent, she said, handing it to him. Old superstition. Might not do anything. But if it does, you'll know it's real. The lake was still when they arrived. Too still. The trees made no sound. The air was heavy. Ethan entered the cottage alone, the lantern clutched tight, and called out, Sophie? Nothing. He waited. Then, a whisper. Ethan. He turned. Sophie stood by the back door. Her skin was damp. Her eyes blank. But her smile, that same twisted one. You came back, she whispered. I want to help you, he lied. She tilted her head. You never answered the phone. I'm here now. She stepped forward. Ethan pulled the vial from his pocket and opened it. The moment the scent filled the air, her smile dropped. Then she screamed. Not like Sophie. Like something older. Animalistic. Guttural. She stumbled back, clutching her face. The shadows in the room shifted. And other shapes began to emerge from the lake outside. Pale, dripping forms. Dozens. All looking like people. But none alive. Clara lit the wood pile they had stacked by the lake's edge. Flames erupted, casting golden light across the shore. Ethan faced Sophie's echo, heart pounding. If you're really her, he said, come to the fire. The figure stood frozen, then it walked forward slowly, unnaturally. Closer. Closer. As it neared the flames, it began to change. The water faded from its skin. The eyes grew brighter. For a moment, it looked like Sophie again. Truly her. She whispered, please help me. Ethan's voice cracked. What's your name? She opened her mouth. But then hesitated. The flames surged. The wind howled. The echo screamed and lunged toward him. But Clara threw the Ashansalt vial into the fire. Light exploded. The figure shrieked. Its form twisted, melted until it collapsed into black water and vanished. And the lake fell silent. Morning sunlight glinted off Ethan's windshield. He stepped out of the cottage, finally prepared to leave Asheville. After everything after the fire, the echo, the haunting, the silence now felt unnatural. Too clean. Too perfect. Like the lake was holding its breath. He slung his duffel bag into the car, wiped condensation from the window and froze. 3 words were written in the dew. I'm still here. His breath caught. It wasn't there before. He was sure of it. Ethan spun around, staring at the quiet woods, the motionless lake. A trick? A leftover echo? Or, Sophie? He sat inside the car for a moment, pulse racing. Could it really be her? Back in town, he showed the message to Clara. She stared, pale. The echo was destroyed. I saw it burn. You saw it. But what if it wasn't the real one? Ethan asked. What if that was just a shadow? Sophie said the lake shows people. Maybe it has layers. Levels. Maybe she's still inside it somehow.
Clara hesitated. You want to go back? If she's alive, if there's even a chance she's still in there, I have to try. Clara reluctantly agreed to help, but only under one condition. We don't just go in blind this time. We look deeper. There might be more in the history. A ritual wasn't enough to free her. Maybe there's a way to bring her back. They searched Asheville's archives again, focusing this time on the earliest settlers, the first mentions of Mistwood Lake. They found something buried in the back pages of a dusty colonial record, written by a preacher named Elias Vaughan in 1794, "The water sings again. Another child gone. No body, no struggle. But last night, her mother swore she heard the girl crying outside. And then, laughing. I fear the lake keeps not their bodies but their souls. As if it mimics them, or traps them. I attempted to write holy oil, fire, and prayer. The apparition screamed, but the water only grew darker. It is my belief they cannot return unless called by name, willingly, and by love. But beware. The lake lies. The lake tempts. If your heart breaks, it wins." Clara read it aloud twice, frowning. If what he wrote is true, the lake feeds on loss, on grief. But if Sophie is truly still there, not just a copy, then calling her might work. Calling her, how? Ethan asked. From the water's edge. At dusk. Her full name. Spoken with intent. But Ethan, she looked at him seriously, if you feel any doubt, it could pull you in too. Ethan nodded. I'm ready. That evening, just before sunset, they returned to the lake. Ethan stood at the shoreline, heart thundering. Clara stood behind him with a rope tied around his waist just in case. The lake shimmered, almost serene. Unbothered. He stepped close and took a breath. Then he spoke, loudly and clearly, Sophie Marie Daniels. Come back to me. No sound. He repeated it. Again. Nothing. Then ripples formed. From the center of the lake, the water parted. Something rose. A figure. Slim. Wet. Pale. Sophie. She looked confused. Cold. But her eyes were alive. Ethan, she whispered. He nearly collapsed. It's really you. But Clara screamed. Ethan, no. Look at her hands. He turned. Sophie's hands were twisted backward. Bending the wrong way. He stepped back in horror.